Hello everybody and welcome back. This will be our next blog entry into smokeadelic.com. We are going to smoke a brisket today, and I'm just going to walk through how I prep mine so you can see what goes on with that, how we manage it, how we get it on the smoker, and what we're going to do with that. Now this is a vacuum sealed, vacuum packed brisket. I got it at Costco. It's USDA Prime, which is going to be better than your choice selections at some of the other stores. So I try to stick with the highest level I can get. The higher you go in beef quality, the more expensive. This one is running $3.70 a pound, so it's an 11-pound brisket. We're looking at about 41 bucks for this thing. So we're going to trim it up, and then just kind of curious to see how much fat of this that we do cut off. We're going to weigh it, and we'll see how much meat we're left with. Now once we're done, we're going to rub it. I have an all-purpose rub on the recipe page over at smokeadelic.com, and that's the rub we're going to put on this today. We're going to use oak as the flavored wood, and we're going to try something different. All the briskets I've ever done, when I smoke them, I always smoke them fat side up. Now today, I have actually done a lot of research on this, and I've seen a couple episodes on Barbecue Pitmasters, if you get a chance to watch that, where some of the contestants actually smoked the brisket fat side down, this being the heavier fat side. I have never smoked a brisket fat side down, so this is going to be a first for me. We're going to see how that comes out, and we're just going to go from there. But you can kind of tell that just by looking at this, there's a big wad of fat in here. We're going to trim some of this off and get it out of the way, because the rub that we put on it is just not going to penetrate through a layer of fat that thick. It's just not going to work. So we're going to get some of that off and get it down to pretty much the bare meat. I plan to cook this for 10 to 12 hours at about 230, somewhere between 230 and 250. So the smoker's already fired up. They've got some wood in there going already. I actually have some 2 pork roasts and some chickens in there for some co-workers. So with the 3 racks on the smoker, didn't want the other 2 to go to waste. And we'll get this on there and we'll see how this looks. Okay. Keep our hands clean. We're going to pop this thing open. Get a better knife for this. Just make sure when you buy meat, you give it the old smell test, because your nose knows what's good and what's not. And if you ever get a bad one, you'll know it as soon as you open it. So, basically, for those of you that have never worked with a brisket before, I'll kind of explain a little bit about what we've got here. The brisket, when you buy the full-blown packaged brisket like this, it's going to come in 2 pieces. Okay, now there's two pieces. One's called the point and one's called the flat. Now the flat part is this area right down here. You can see that big layer of fat in between there. It's about that wide. We're going to cut about half of that off and get about a 1/4 inch. Now this other end down here on the brisket is called the point, and it has a higher fat content in it, and it's usually separated by an entirely huge chunk of fat through here. So we're going to cut that out also, and we're going to trim it up. We're going to get it rubbed down. It's not going to sit, overnight, so people leave theirs sit overnight. We're just going to get it straight on the smoker and see what happens in the next 10 to 12 hours. Okay, so let's go ahead and get some of this fat off of here. It's very thick, and you can feel it as you're cutting through it. There's no mistaking where the fat is on this thing. This is the underside of the brisket. And again, I'm going to cook this fat side down, so this will be the side that faces up in the smoker. This will be going on the top rack in the smoker, so it's the farthest from the heat. Temperature variation in my smoker, on that stump smoker, between the bottom rack and the top is about 5 to 10 degrees, somewhere in there, so I'm not worried about a big heat spike, big fluctuations. So it should come out really good, and you can tell this has got some good marbling in it. Again, this big chunk of fat right here, you can see it. We're just going to trim this down. You can feel as the knife goes through it when you're getting through the meat and into the fat. It really has a different feel to it in the tightness when you're pulling the knife. So again, this stuff is not going to cook off. It's going to make a big mess. And the fact that it's going fat side down, more of it's going to run off into the grease pan. I just want to get the big chunks of it off that are not going to do anything. Okay, got a little into the meat there, but that's going to be okay. Basically, you just want to trim off anything as you start doing these more. You'll see parts of the brisket you don't think are going to be edible. They're not worth it. Just going to go ahead and trim off what you think you don't need. And you learn from experience. If you do one and it doesn't come out the way you want it because you trim so much off, well, the next time you learn from it. So this brisket here, this bottom piece is looking pretty good so far. We're gonna get that off of there. So now another thing, you want to make sure you do when you cook the brisket, when it's done, you always want to trim it. You always want to cut it up against the grain of the meat. So as you can see here, this meat is running like this. Here's the grain of the meat, and it's flowing this way. So when I slice this thing, I do not want to slice it in the same direction that the grain is running in the meat. I want to slice it against the grain. So with my carving knife, I would want to go this way with it, and the slices will come down this way. Grain's running this way, you want to slice across that grain. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to eat. It's going to be very chewy, and nobody really wants that. So that's something always important to remember when you're slicing it. Now, the thing is after this thing is sitting in the smoker for 10 to 12 hours, all of this stuff that you see here right now, this grain in the meat, is going to be very difficult to discern. You're not going to be able to tell where that is. Okay, so in order to help me remember in 12 hours which direction I need to cut, I'm going to slice off a corner of this brisket right here. So now when this comes out, this square end is going to tell me that's the direction I need to go. Boom, 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 and I will slice this brisket accordingly. Okay, because like I said, and we'll show this when the thing comes off, how you're not going to be able to see this grain in the meat anymore. And so that'll be our step. It's just that one little edge comes off, and I know I need to cut right there, parallel to that. And we're just going to come right across. We'll cut through here, up into the point, and it'll slice up really, really nice. In fact, if we cook it right, the juice is just going to be pouring out of this thing. Now, in between, each one of these packer briskets is a little different. Sometimes they're a little harder to tell, but in between this flat area and the point up here is this huge wad of fat, and it separates the two. And I'm going to try to get some of that fat out of there. And again, I just like to trim off what I don't think looks presentable. There's usually an edge right around the side of the brisket that sometimes looks a little brown from where it's been vacuum sealed. I usually get rid of that. It's a aesthetic thing with me. Some people leave it. Now, a lot of the big restaurant chains, when they do their briskets, they don't trim them. They have the big industrial sized smokers, and they just pull their briskets out of the vacuum seal, and right into the smoker it goes with whatever rub they use. That's the way they do it. But most home cooks, you're going to need to trim some of that off. We can't buy in bulk like that, to get the better deal. But you can tell from that right there, there's a huge wad of fat that separates these two pieces of meat. This flat is running under the top of this point here. Okay, so I just want to get some of that out of there because it's not going to do what we call render. And what that is when the fat gets hot enough, it will liquefy. And the fact that there's so much of it here and where it's located, it is not going to liquefy into anything that's going to do well for our meat. We want the heat to penetrate up in there and that smoke to get up in there to season that meat. So, take out some of that stuff. You'll see here in just a second, see that's nothing but real hard, thick fat, and it's very tough. And you can feel it doesn't indent very well. I mean, it's really, really tough. So we want to get that out. Again, here's the flat coming over. And you can see, like I was talking about, that big layer of fat that separates the two. And we're just going to trim a little more of this out of here. Again, as I said, it's a matter of preference. How much you want to leave in or how much you want to take off. And I'm kind of curious, so we'll weigh it and see out of this 11-pound brisket how much we've got left. How much we paid for, we're not actually going to eat. It's kind of like when you get a chicken and they're stuffed with all sorts of guts. You're not going to use necks and gizzards and livers and hearts and things like that that most people just throw away. I like to make gravy out of those things, but they still charge you for it because it adds weight. Okay, I'm liking the way that's looking right there. Now the rub I'm going to use, even though I am here from Texas, I'm going to use a different rub like I mentioned earlier. I'm going to use my all-purpose rub that I have a recipe for on the recipe page at smokadelic.com. That's the one I'm going to use today. A lot of times in Texas you'll see brisket that's just peppery, and it's got a real good cracked black pepper taste, and it's very, very good. Today I'm going to try the rub here on the brisket. I'm going to use oak, maybe throw a little cherry in later just to add a little diversity in the flavor. But I like the way this brisket looks right here. And again, it's going to go in this side will be face up, which is going to be different for me. I always do them fat side up, but hey, it's all about experimenting and learning something new. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, so here we go. Let's go ahead and get our shaker bottle out. It's got the rub in it, and we will go ahead and get this thing rubbed down and ready to go. I normally season it with the side that's going to go on the smoker first. That way I don't have to keep flipping it. So this will be my downside. I'm going to go ahead and season that first. And here I have a shaker bottle of that all-purpose rub. It's got some chili powder in it, some chili pepper that we like. Kind of adds a bite to it. Doesn't last long, but it is very, very good. So I'm just going to liberally cover this up. Now, there's not much salt in this compared to some other rubs. In Texas, we do a lot of black pepper and salt. And it makes for a really good bark on your brisket. It's really, really good to eat. This rub has some paprika in it, and it gives it a nice red color. You can see that marbling before I cover it up. It's a prime, so we've got a lot more marbling in the meat. As you can see right there, it's going to have a lot of good flavor in it. That fat is going to render out and just make this thing juicy as anything. Make sure we get all the sides. Okay. This looks really, really good. I'll flip it over. Now the thing is, I can douse this in between here. I'll give it a little bit of the rub. The problem is a lot of this doesn't cook out, and you'll have a big glob of your rub in there, which you don't want. Nobody wants to eat a big glob of that stuff on their brisket. Okay, so we've got it all covered up here. We've got some good spices in there. It says garlic and mustard, onion. It's got some sugar in it. I like a sweetness in my rub, and of course I add a little of that chili powder. It gives it a nice little bite. Okay. And as I mentioned before, we're going to use oak, and we're pretty much done. It's time to get this thing laid out on the smoker. This will be side up. I'll get a temperature probe popped in here, and we're going to cook this thing to about 195 degrees. We're going to pull it off after that point, let it sit, and then we're going to slice it and have some wonderful barbecue sandwiches. So I will go ahead and pause the video, I'll show you what this looks like when it's out on the smoker here in about 5 minutes. Be right back. All right, the smoker is up to temp. Got this thing out here now on the last rack that we have available. It's going to be sitting up really high in the smoker today. And so I just need one more probe off the guru here. That's my pit temp. Where's my food here? Food. 1, 2, and which one am I missing? There it is. I'm going to put this on the flat side because I want to know when that thinner piece of meat is getting close to being done. That's hot. Whew. All right. I can bring this in a little bit to show you what else we got cooking here. Let's see. You can see that. We've got 2 pork roasts. Ouch. 2 pork roasts out here. Those are looking good. And we got 2 whole chickens that have been halved. Those things will be done here in about 2 more hours. So just close it up. And now the hard part, we wait. All right, we've got that on the smoker, and like I said earlier, I'm just kind of curious how much fat we take off that brisket. Out of the 11 pounds, what do we have left? So I'm going to throw that here in a bag, we're going to weigh it up, and we're going to see just how much waste we had on that brisket. It already feels like about, I'm going to guess, about 5 pounds. But maybe not that high. Let's get up there. One more piece. All right. Moment of truth. That is 3 pounds, 5.8 ounces. So 3 pounds, 6 ounces. A little over 3 pounds of fat. So we're looking at 9 pounds. 9 pounds of brisket coming off that we'll have, plus the shrinkage. So that's going to end up down. This again was 11.1 pounds. So we're going to end up with under 9. So 10, 9, 8, 7.5 pounds, whatever. Now, I put all this in a Ziploc. I have to dispose of this stuff properly because this is Saturday, and the trash guys don't pick up till Friday. If I were to go out and throw this in my trash can by Friday, it's going to smell like I got a dead body out in my trash can, so I can't do that. I've got to throw this in the freezer, and just next Thursday night before the trash guys come in, I'll pull it out of the freezer, throw it in the trash. Won't have to worry about any stench. Keeps the animals away too. Okay, well that covers it for now until we actually pull the brisket off, and we'll be back then. Going to take about 8, 10, 12 hours. We'll see you then. All right, the brisket is done. It cooked for about 9.5 hours, and finally hit its temperature. We've got a good bark on it. Feels nice and moist. It's just a matter of carving it up, giving it a taste to see if it came out right. This is the one we cooked fat side down. So here's the fatty side, and no worse for the wear. That little piece where I got into the meat when I trimmed it, but it looks pretty good. Looks like it's going to be real tender. So carve that up. Remember, there's that mark I made, so I know exactly how to cut it. I just want to cut off parallel to here, and just have a look at what's going on. The juice is just pouring right out of that thing. Looks excellent. So that's our brisket. 9.5 hours, fat side down, and it looks really, really good. It's going to make some good sandwiches. We'll just carve that up. And it'll be good to go. That's all we got for this brisket. We'll see y'all next time.